welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Marantz-Cohen, and today our guest is Marty Moss-Coane, the award-winning host and executive producer of Radio Times, one of the Philadelphia area's most respected interview shows. Radio Times is broadcast live on weekdays from 10 a.m. until noon on WHYY, Philadelphia's public radio station. Marty Moss-Coane, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Thank you, Paula.
I have to say I feel rather daunted interviewing
You shouldn't.
the master interviewer, as I really think of you, because I listen
you.
to you often. And but I imagine that you do get interviewed occasionally, and I wonder what it feels like for you to be on the receiving end of what you do for a living in the other direction.
Well, it's an interesting question because I often feel like I'm a better interviewer than I am an interviewee.
Well, you
so
do.
Time will tell.
You interview more than you are interviewed.
I certainly do.
Yeah.
I certainly do. But I'm not often interviewed. I often feel as if hosts are there to do their job, and my personal life or my working life isn't necessarily the important thing about what I do. But I'm happy to do them on occasion.
You're in the public eye so much
Yes.
that I imagine people now know you and want to know more about you, which is certainly a reason why we wanted to have you here.
Sure.
You're known for your interviews on a wide range of topics. In fact, it really dazzles me to think of the range that you cover: religion, politics, art, culture, business, any number of things. And I wonder about how you put together, it's a daily show, weekly, every week, how you put together the particular mix of topics every week. Is it serendipity? Is it really a concerted effort for a mix? How does that work?
It really is a very much a concerted effort, and my feeling is that by the time a week or 2 weeks or a month is over, I want to feel as if we have covered the front page, the sports page, the arts page, the movie page.
Okay.
If using a newspaper as an example, I do have 3 really terrific producers, and I get a lot of the glory and the blame as well, but they also deserve a lot of accolades for the kind of work that they do.
Yeah.
So we'll often key off of things that are happening in the news, and while I'm on the air working on doing the shows that are live that day, they're working behind the scenes trying to put together something on, the insurgency problem in Iraq, or someone that's coming to Philadelphia who's giving a performance somewhere. So while I'm doing that, they're multitasking behind the scenes. But we look for a wide variety of topics. It reflects our interests, my interests, and we think it reflects the interest and curiosity of people in our audience.
Yeah. And how would you describe that audience? I mean, you do have a very devoted following. That's for sure.
We do. I mean, on a good day, they're a pain in the neck. What can I say?
Well, the callers
Or a
maybe.
bad
There is
day,
particular segment of your audience, I suppose. How would you characterize your audience?
Well, I do think of them as, and I know from some little bit of the research that's been done, is they're pretty well educated. They are certainly most of them living around here in the Delaware Valley. I think they're probably a little left-leaning, but you'd be surprised how many conservatives, self-described conservatives, listen to public radio. I think they're intensely passionate about the things that they care about, opinionated about the things that they think they know a lot about. I think with an audience like that, it really raises the bar, which is why as a host, you can't just sort of slog in the morning and throw together a show or something. You really have to have done your homework, because they've done their homework and they've read a lot of books, and they also read all the newspapers we read and listen to what we listen to and watch what we watch. So they keep us on our toes. And I like that. I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Well, talking about the nature of the show, I mean, it is a live call-in show. And that is, that's sort of scary, I would imagine. I mean, I think that there are probably pros and cons to that format. Could you talk a little bit about what you see as the advantages and what you see as the disadvantages of that format?
Well, it is an interview call-in show, so I would say if it's a play, then the guest is really the star of the show in many ways, and my job is to bring out either their personality or their ideas. And I see the callers playing a variety of different roles in that particular play. With callers, they will raise things that you would never think of. We had a woman on today who actually was one of the editors of Ms. Magazine, and she's written a book about women in midlife, saying it's not all bad. In fact, there's some really great things going on. You can, reconfigure your life. And we had a woman truck driver from the New York Thruway call into the show to talk about how she had changed her life.
Oh, wow.
Now,
Yeah.
that makes a show, something like that. I mean, and that's not something that I could bring to the show.
Right.
And then there are times when callers really just want to talk about themselves. They don't add much to the show. I think on very heated issues where people are very divided, it's very difficult to get people to listen to each other, respond to each other. So you get a lot of speechifying, things like that.
Well, I noticed something, and tell me if I'm wrong about this. I feel you, over the years I've listened to you, you've gotten, I don't say better because it's not better or worse, but you've gotten, you're able to cut people off a bit more than you used to, and sort of when they start to speechify, you just, you put an end to it.
Well, I've been doing this a long time, and you know,
when did you start?
Yeah,
when did you start changing? Would you say it was a change of style?
It's probably over time, and because I've done a lot of shows over the years, we do 500 in a year, so I've got a lot of shows under my belt, and it probably reflects a little impatience on my part.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to move on to the next thing, but that doesn't mean that everyone listening wants to move on as well. And I realize that the show is really for listeners, and that callers have a role to play, but it's not to hear, you know, Bill from New Jersey go on and on and on about his pet ideas.
Right.
That if he's there to really serve the show and to serve the listeners. So I've learned and even with guests sometimes, they'll take that little breath. But I can just like
I noticed that. You do that so well.
And, you know, boom, off we go.
I'm studying you, by the way. Well, tell me, thinking back over the past year, could you tell me about some of your favorite guests or perhaps shows that you've had that stick in your memory that you could just quickly tell us about?
Well, one that really stays in my mind was the movie Hotel Rwanda that many people saw came out over the Christmas holidays. We had not only the director on the show, but we also had the man about whom the story is about.
Right.
A man named Paul Rusesabagina, who by himself in Rwanda, while the massacres were going on, you know, saved the lives of something like 1,200 people. And he was just the most charming, unassuming, modest man. And the interview, Terry George, who's actually a very good director. I mean, I sort of used Terry George to bring out a little bit about Paul, because there's no way that he was going to talk about the fact that he really was a hero to so many people. But to me, to be sort of in the presence of someone who stood up under those circumstances and to be able to talk to them was really just an honor. I mean, something like that to me feels like a gift. And that's one that'll probably stay with me forever, because you don't often get to meet people like that, or a Nelson Mandela, or someone else that just defied what was going on.
A true hero.
A true hero, a great risk to himself.
It's interesting you had the director on too, and you say that it actually worked. Often you have two guests.
Yes.
And I wonder if you feel that works, if that's harder at times, and at other times they're foils, I guess, for each other.
Yeah, we try to figure out what would work together, single guests. If there's a single author of a book, I mean, chances are we're going to interview him about his book, or her about her book, and spend the time with them that way. But if it's a debate, or if it's a political thing, or if it has something that has a legal part, a political part, then oftentimes we'll get several different guests and I think it enriches the show to be able to do that.
Yeah,
and it's more fun, and then you can get people that play off each other, or argue with each other, depending.
A good argument always works well.
Yeah.
No, I agree. How about lousy guests? I don't know if you're going to name names here, which we would love you to do.
Of course you would.
But you will.
I probably wouldn't. I mean, we have had lousy guests. I mean, to me, the lousy guests are the boring guests.
Yeah, for an interviewer.
The ponderous talkers, you know. I mean, when I interview, there's a clock sort of over the guest's head, so I know it's like, if I'm aware, you know, all the seconds that are going by. And I've had guests where I just, after maybe 15 or 20 minutes, I just, you know, I can't stand this. And I just say, you know, thank you very much. We're going to move on.
Really?
Really.
Even unplanned?
Yeah, unplanned. But I just feel like if I'm bored to tears, I don't want to bore the audience. I figure, who's going to hang around and listen to someone, you know, just yammering on about something? We've had hostile guests. We had a couple of guests who kind of decompensated on the air. We've had guests who were drunk and high.
Really? But that could be very good radio.
It was terrible radio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I guess it depends on how coherent it is.
Exactly. Yeah. We had one guy, I knew he was high as a kite, and he just kept kind of like, you know, doing things.
So did you get him off as quickly as possible?
Well, we actually had another guest with him, so we were able to, again, I could sort of move him to the background and let him, nod off.
I see.
But, the truth is that that's the rare guest. Most of them are pretty good, and we're pretty choosy about who we have on the show anyway.
Yeah, and I guess your producers do some prep and
some preliminary, not for everybody, for some people, just to touch base so we know they can hang.
Well, that's the other thing with the callers. It fascinates me. I assume they go through a process where they're screened somewhat, but yet you can never tell.
No. I mean, I sometimes feel like the phone screener has the hardest job because, it's on, 150,000 people. You're giving out an 800 number.
Right.
If you're talking about, especially something that's controversial, people are going to call in, they're angry, they're just sort of off their rocker sometimes, and it's her job or his job, depending on who's.
Has there been an incident that comes to mind that was particularly embarrassing or that you had to deal with, cut off?
Yeah, we did have. We had a crank caller. In fact, he's a Howard Stern part of his entourage.
Yeah.
Who I was interviewing Joe Huffle, who was running for Congress. And the guy called in, and he sounded very normal to the screener. Got through to me, and he, of course, it's a great show, Marty. I love it. And then he turned to Joe Huffle and asked if he wanted to have sex with me. That was very embarrassing.
Not that embarrassing.
It was embarrassing. And Joe Huffle was like just speechless.
Well, you've made it when you've had a crank caller from Howard Stern, it seems to me. You've really made it to the top. I want you to tell me a little bit about the preparation that you do for the show, which I imagine is not just the kind of preparation you do for an individual guest, but there must be, long-term and large-scale preparation just to keep yourself abreast in so many different areas. As you say, you want to have a mix for the week, for the month, for the year, whatever. What do you do to stay informed in that kind of broad way that you need to be?
I read several newspapers a day, and that's sort of my daily, meal of news and information. The New York Times, Inquirer, Philadelphia Daily News, and then a lot of the weekly magazines. Everything from Newsweek to The Nation, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Not that I read every word, but it's just my way of sort of constantly feeding myself news and information. And again, I have these producers, and they all have their own pet areas of interest as well.
Okay.
And then for the individual shows, it's just the day before homework because it's 5 days a week. I really can't work ahead on anything.
Yeah.
And I always joke, it's all the homework I never did in high school.
So you weren't a good student?
I was a terrible student.
Really?
I was in remedial reading. And I read for a living now. I was a very lousy student, a very checkered student, actually.
Now, your father was a teacher.
Yes, he was.
And he was at was he at Groton and St. Andrews?
Groton School in Massachusetts, and then St. Andrews in Delaware.
Which are very prestigious prep schools. And you grew up in that environment.
I did.
Which is high pressure, academic, and you were in remedial.
I was in remedial reading.
Was that?
And math.
Are you sure you were not rebelling?
Right, or a foundling or something.
What changed that then, that made you go in the other direction?
I was just, I think, a classic late bloomer. And my husband, who's a psychologist, actually, when he was in graduate school at Hahnemann, when it was Hahnemann, I guess now it's Drexel or whatever,
it is.
Was doing some testing, using me as a guinea pig. And he did one of those Bender tests, which tells about just your perceptual motor things.
Yeah.
I'm a mess. I'm a reversal person, and I can't remember numbers, all this kind of thing. But I learned over time the sort of tricks of the trade. I think I just grew up. I finally, by the time I got to college, I got to be a very good student.
Yeah.
And I just sort of learned how to navigate around all those various infirmities or disabilities that I have. So
now you are an avid reader, I take it.
Now I'm an avid reader.
Yeah. One of the things that strikes me about you as an interviewer is that when you interview an author, you seem to, this may not be true, but you seem to have read the books, and to care about the book as well as the author's